probably a bad idea. They want your shelter, your food, your water.
Directed by Colin Minihan, we are talking Coyotes, and this one stars Justin Long and Kate Bosworth, and is a horror comedy creature feature. Well, you've probably guessed, about coyotes. Now, this takes place in the Hollywood Hills, and we get kind of a little bit of like news reports and stuff about coyote attacks in the kind of the beginning of the movie, and the fact that climate change is kind of pushing them out in, you know, from their kind of the Hollywood Hills into more kind of urban areas. And we focus on a family living in the Hollywood Hills. Justin Long is the father, Kate Bosworth is the mother, and there's like a teenage daughter. And, you know, we get a couple of like neighbours and other characters as well. And one night there is this big storm, and this kind of causes chaos in Los Angeles, Hollywood area. The phone lines are down, the electricity is out, the emergency services, you know, can't get to everyone. So we have this kind of family who are now trapped because a tree has fallen on their car. And they are being surrounded by a group of unusually aggressive coyotes who have blood on their mind. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's discuss. Now, first and foremost, the biggest thing I would say in the plus column with this movie, it's fun. This is a fun movie. It's not a kind of particularly serious movie. As I say, it is a horror comedy. If you want more of a dramatic creature feature, Jaws, this is not. This is more like Piranha, if that makes sense, or even Piranha 2 to a degree. It's kind of a little bit more of a goofier creature feature, but it is a fun one. It has quite a sort of sense of like a kinetic feeling during the directing, like whenever we first get to know a character, they get almost like a kind of a comic book like sort of frame, basically, to kind of give you like this little like, you know, introduction to the character and stuff like that. The tone of the movie sort of oscillates between a kind of fun, light, breezy kind of comedy with lots of kind of pop culture references. There's a great kind of reference to The Grey, with obviously Liam Neeson in this movie. But we also get a little commentary on like Hollywood elites and that sort of thing, and how they kind of like to almost live in a bubble, things like this, and a variety of kind of eccentric sort of characters. So it has this kind of like upbeat kind of funny elements to it, and kind of like just, you know, goofiness, but it also has quite vicious and bloody kills. So it really sort of has one foot in each kind of path, so to speak. So, you know, it's a fun and kind of light movie in some respects, but there are also some sort of quite vicious deaths, and it's not just coyote attacks. We also get a couple of people die from related injuries, let's just say. So, you know, it tries to have a little bit of kind of variety and stuff. I do think this movie, the humour is obviously going to be subjective, but I did find some of the humour quite funny, I have to say. Some of the kind of I mean, Justin Long has kind of background of comedic work, and I think he's quite good as this sort of affable but sort of quite beta male, if that makes sense. But there are a few kind of good jokes and things like this, not just from him, but from other characters as well. So the movie does have a you know, a wry sense of humour, and it has this sort of fairly kind of quick pace, I would suggest. So it's never a movie which is meandering at any point. It's punctuated with these kind of coyote attacks or some type of disaster and things like this, and you have these kind of over-the-top characters that are all very sort of unique in their own regards. Arguably you could say they're a little bit over the top, but they were certainly memorable in that respect as well. And the VFX, I have to say, it looks like they've used a mix of CGI, practical and AI. Now if you have issues with AI, that's fair enough. I don't. Whatever makes the film look as good as it possibly could be, I'm up for it. And I think the effects of this one look good. I think the coyotes, yes, you can kind of tell they're sort of AI at times, but I still kind of quite like them. I think they looked very dramatic in certain sequences, the way they're kind of like, there's scenes where we have a fire and stuff, and how that kind of light is reflecting on them and things like this. And they're sort of somewhat, they look sort of like coyotes, but they're slightly more exaggerated, a little, maybe a little bit like Jaws. Their teeth are a little longer and things like this. But they're not like, you can't say, oh, these are some sort of creature. They're clearly coyotes. So, I think it does a good job of getting that balance right. I kind of quite like the effects. I never thought the effects looked, bad in any way. And again, this isn't a massively high budgeted movie. So I think they've actually done a pretty good job here of kind of creating these kind of coyotes and making them feel genuinely kind of dangerous and things like this. The cast isn't too big, so we keep it to a relatively small cast of characters that are quite kind of over the top, but also at the same time makes them sort of, as I say, quite memorable. So overall, it's a kind of fun vibe, if you don't mind a kind of admittedly somewhat schlocky B movie to a degree. And maybe that won't work for some of you. So if you wanted a more dramatic movie, a more serious take on an animal attacks type movie, this probably isn't going to be the film for you. But that's less of a critique, more of a just commenting on your taste, as is the kind of the sense of humour. Now, not every joke lands, for me at least, but I thought generally speaking it was quite funny. But ultimately, the humour isn't going to be for everyone. Perhaps maybe it's a little bit it ends up being the characters being a little bit too goofy at times. And I would say that's legitimate criticism. I would say one thing that stood out to me is every male character in this movie is over the top, some type of idiot, some type of eccentric character. We really have three male characters. We've got Justin Longstaff, who is this like wimpy beta male. Now they've obviously done this to try and have an arc, so where he can come good at the end, right? But he is ultimately a massively over-the-top wimp. We have the neighbour, and he's kind of like sleazy, over-the-top sleazy and everything like that. And then we have like the extermination guy, who is again an over-the-top sort of caricature. He's fun, but he's not like a realistic character in any way. So all of the male characters are treated to be somewhat type of goofy. But Kate Bosworth's character, and even the daughter to a degree, are quite grounded and more kind of dramatic in their approach, shall we say. I mean, the daughter's like a teenager, Gen Z type, but I wouldn't say she's playing anything over the top to what like a real life Gen Z was. And I thought, sometimes the films tend to sort of they can't make fun of the female characters. They've got to make fun of the male characters. And that's true of this one to a point. There is a couple of female characters where they do have a little bit more fun with. We have a prostitute character who's actually quite endearing, I have to say. And she's a little bit more over the top, but not to the degree that the guys are. And then we get a small role for Katherine McNamara at the beginning, who's like this kind of like valley girl type. And again, she's probably somewhat played for laughs. But I do think it's a kind of a trend in Hollywood where they sort of make the male characters seem like doofus or dumb or eccentric, whilst making the female characters more like the responsible ones. And it's kind of like a little bit of a trope, I have to say. I think the tonal shifts do undermine some of the kind of what could have been the more dramatic elements. I mean, people do die, and people do die in quite horrible fashion, but because this movie has this sort of light and breezy comedic tone, it loses some of the impact on what could have been otherwise a quite a disturbing scene. Now, this could have been, you could argue, by design. It doesn't want to be a disturbing movie. It wants to be this kind of fun, goofier film, but you know, because of that, these kind of deaths are treated as a more throwaway sort of scene. No death really has any real kind of impact in regards to dramatic sort of sequences and things like that. Even though when you think about what has happened, it does seem quite horrible and quite, you know, very vicious and very painful. But the movie never lets the movie get that dragged down in any type of real sort of drama and things like this. I think Justin Long's character, as I say, is a little bit too much of a wimp, to the point where you can't really match him and the Kate Bosworth character. They just seem too far apart, and you could argue that opposites attract, I suppose. And there's a thing where he's this workaholic, but he's such a kind of like goofy character. I just can't see him taking a job that seriously. They kind of say, oh yeah, he's this workaholic and stuff, but he's like such a goof. Would this guy take a job this seriously? I don't know. I didn't really feel like someone like that would do. Anyway, but it's clear where they're going to go with that kind of character arc, and it's somewhat obvious that that will happen. I think they give a sort of semi-reason for the Coyotes, why they are acting up. I don't know if I completely bought that, if I'm honest, and it doesn't really explain Coyotes in this kind of surrounding area. Maybe specifically the house, but it doesn't really kind of explain the Coyotes in the kind of the larger radius of what's happening. So, you know, ultimately, is it a great movie in a sort of cinephile aesthetic? Probably not. But I would say it's a fairly well put together movie for the film that it is trying to be. This isn't trying to be high art. It is not trying to be like an awards movie. It is trying to be a fun creature feature with somewhat over the top, larger than life characters. And although I do have some reservations with it, I do think it largely succeeds in the film that it is trying to be. Therefore, I am going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. Would you see it based on what I've told you? Please do let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.